Welcome to meet our nerd MC, Ju-yeon. He can download or replicate any capability found on YouTube. He becomes a pro mixed martial artist right away, using this skill midway through the battle. But he really calls David Goggins to inspire him while he is confronting an enemy much above his level of ability. And that served as the opening. Let us now start. Though it's not someone else's bag, our protagonist, a school student, carries one considerably heavier than others. His bag weighs 32 kilograms, hence he gets daily dyspnea and sweating. When two students taunt Ju-yeon for struggling, they inquire whether he is carrying military gear to the university. Ju-yeon, totally tired, pauses to regain his breath. His face is covered in perspiration. One of the muscular boys offers to assist carry Ju-yeon's bags. Ju-yeon shakes his head and tells them he doesn't need aid, fatigued notwithstanding. No is not a response the two lads accept. One holds Ju-yeon back, the other reaches for the bag. The ugly student yanks Ju-yeon's hair forcefully, snarling that they would soon enough be returning his luggage. Ju-yeon's vision is inundated with a rainbow of odd disorganized screaming the instant the sack is taken from his body. Ju-yeon has been plagued with the ability to visualize internet data as though it were playing before him, overloading his mind with unwelcome noise since a childhood mishap. Ju-yeon's brain pounds from the deluge of data. His stomach turns. He feels as though he might pass out. As he is ready to fall, the muscular student throws the bag back at Ju-yeon, unable to manage its weight. Once more clutching the sack, Ju-yeon sighs with relief. His head clears right away. The bag has a signal blocking mechanism that stops the continuous flood of internet data, therefore enabling Ju-yeon to operate as usual. Ju-yeon is lying his head on his desk at school, the bag firmly next to him. He turns around his playlist, trying to unwind while wearing headphones on. Jisoo, a happy young woman, approaches Ju-yeon waving broadly. Thanking him for his earlier comments, Jisoo offers him a snack and notes that she changed her thumbnail wording in line with his recommendation. Unaware her phone isn't linked to Wi-Fi, proudly she shows Ju-yeon her YouTube account, claiming her views have skyrocketed. Understanding this, she checks her phone and scowls in dismay, stating that the Wi-Fi was operational just minutes ago. Ju-yeon softly blocks the signal close by knowing his rucksack is the offender. Jisoo notes that Ju-yeon is usually hooked to YouTube as she compliments him on his sense of style as she keeps surfing her phone. Ju-yeon, ashamed, confesses he watches videos on YouTube for a lot of time. Walking away smiling, Jisoo advises him to join the broadcasting club should he be interested. Ju-yeon smiles when she leaves, but still feels completely exhausted. Ju-yeon is disconnected from everything, including the internet, hence romance seems impossible. His part-time job with the excavator is the only place he finds comfortable. The bag is useless at work, since the loud noise of demolition interrupts internet data transfer. Ju-yeon finds comfort in his work, even if the surroundings are chaotic. He feels normal while running large machines. Two builders marvel at Ju-yeon, one of which wishes they could hire him full-time if he weren't in school, and calls him a prodigy. The captain reprimands them to quit slacking and get back to work, therefore cutting off their idle conversation. The captain acknowledges from a taste from his drink that Ju-yeon is quite gifted for his age. Ju-yeon does this employment to test his special skill, in addition to for the great hourly pay. His skill enables him to use internet data under specific situations, not only see and hear it. Simply said, it's like seeing a YouTube video and downloading its directions straight into his head. Ju-yeon can copy the abilities displayed in a video by concentrating on it, even if right now he only operates excavators. Ju-yeon thanks his commander after a demanding day of labor and finds his compensation in an envelope. Ju-yeon's captain asks jokingly how he's doing in school. Ju-yeon says tensely he is thinking about leaving shortly. Startled, the captain probes why Ju-yeon says he feels helpful running machinery but useless in school. Emphasizing the value of school life, the captain counsels him not to hurry into decisions. Ju-yeon grudgingly agrees to consider it when sighing. The air smells suddenly like smoke, and the captain sees a structure close by burning. He signals the employees to call the fire department and grab office extinguishers by blowing his whistle. Ju-yeon looks at the flames and wonders why the demolition site caught fire. He is relieved nobody should be inside. But when he discovers someone is caught in the burning building, his comfort becomes terror. Ju-yeon, terrified, runs to the captain demanding the excavator's key. Startled, the captain queries inside. Juyan is already moving though, carrying a key in hand, confirming someone's presence. A desperate call for aid comes from a window. The site is crowded with onlookers and rescue workers within minutes, all observing the event develop. Juyan, meantime, gets ready to act by climbing into the excavator and turning it on. Driving the excavator toward the structure, he positions it under the caught person. Juyan prepares for the rescue by rapidly absorbing excavator data from the internet into his memory. Juyan starts straightening the shovel connected to the excavator, since it is shocked and unable to understand Juyan is fixing the shovel in such a perilous environment. The captain watches. Juyan leaves the digger, walks out of the shovel when it is correctly aligned, tells the captain to raise. Juyan stands firm inside the shovel and rises as the captain lifts it to expose a woman caught inside the structure, holding a baby in her arms. The woman thanks Juyan tearingly for coming to save them. Juyan remembers his childhood accident as he approaches the mother and child, experiencing PTSD. Trapped in their car, his mother had urged him to flee and live while he saw. Just seconds before the automobile burst into flames, a man had dragged small Juyan away. Helpless Juyan had been compelled to see the catastrophe play out. Juyan feels his emotions surge, and his head pounds with intolerable anguish. Now he sees the mother crying for her baby. The excavator starts to vibrate suddenly, nearly sending Juyan off balance. Working the excavator, the skipper seems perplexed as he attempts to understand why it is trembling. Juyan concentrates, driven not to let anyone die in front of him once more despite the suffering and anarchy. Tightly clutching his head, he tells the mother to keep put. Juyan leaps off the excavator's shovel and charges for the window as the baby's sobs get loud. The captain yells at him, warning him it's too risky. Seeing this careless deed, Juyan walks into the building as a blast of flames leaps from the window. The throng below gasps in awe, their features tinged with terror and incredulity. Moments later, the mother leaps from the window and settles gently in the shovel of the dig. Once safe, she turns back nervously looking for her child. Fortunately, Juyan shows up at the window carrying the wailing infant and offers it to her mother. The mother gives her infant close hugs, clearly relieved. Juyan gets on the ledge of the window, ready to leap, knowing the mother and kid are secure. To leap fast, the captain yells at him. Juyan beams, pleased with his courageous attempt to preserve life. Juyan is flung from the window as a sudden large eruption of flames bursts forth. Juyan starts tumbling quickly down. Desperate, he lunges out and catches the edge of the windowsills, therefore arresting his fall momentarily. Juyan grips to the sill with all his might, but the concrete he is holding breaks right away. Juyan drops to the ground alongside the wreckage as it crashes. Juyan falls, with nothing to grab or hang onto, like a bird without wing. He did everything he could, yet he finds it incomprehensible why he is destined for such terrible fate. All he ever wanted was a regular existence. Today, he is minutes away from his end. Though the fall seems limitless, Juyan discovers he is drifting in a large, dark, empty area instead of the ground. Not knowing whether he's dead, Juyan is blinded all of a sudden by a strong light. Like a video, a huge screen opens out before him and starts to broadcast events from Juyan's life. Confused and annoyed, Juyan yells at the television asking what's going on. Startled, Juyan discovers the system is speaking to him and answers a voice. On the screen, an unusual monster insulting Juyan and labeling him as dull-witted calls attention to Furious. Juyan looks at the system and demands it stop squandering his time and get right to the issue. Abruptly, he finds himself in front of a massive projection of a brain component. Juyan's head stings with a severe pain. He holds it with both hands, trying to keep straight. Juyan falls to his knees as the suffering gets worse, thinking as though his mind would break at any instant. While Juyan hates the brain for causing him such intolerable suffering, it berates him for not employing his talents to their maximum capacity. Just as a lightning bolt hits Juyan, the brain declares it will share its strength with him and reveals itself as Stream, the last seed of Yggdrasil. Everything becomes dark. Juyan passes out and subsequently comes to consciousness under the ground. Juyan wakes up alive following the strange encounter. The doctors send him home without noting any injuries or damage. Still traumatized, Juyan struggles to understand what he went through or whether it was true. But a more serious issue looms as Juyan finds his talent has changed and grown even more unusual. He discovers he can now watch videos, not only hear data or voices, while still compelled to carry the bulky signal-blocking gadget. When Juyeon woke up in the hospital, he found odd flying displays hanging about everyone. Beside the nurse, a video of a heavy metal concert floated. An idol video hovered next to Doctor, and a horrific beasts film showed up next to woman, shaking her head in disbelief. Juyeon reasoned these must be the most popular YouTube videos among individuals. Now Juyeon shows up at his classroom, sets his suitcase next to his desk, and, tired, inhales deeply. Feeling absolutely bored in learning anything, he sits down and lowers his head onto the desk. Walking into the classroom, the teacher tells the pupils to settle in. Then he says, a fresh student has enrolled in their class. Asking Min Seoha, the student, to come into the room, the teacher introduces her, clearly delighted with the new pupil. A guy seated in front of Juyeon says, Min Seoha is gorgeous. Juyeon, meantime, spots a floating video player near Min Seoha, but this one shows an access denied sign. Min Seoha looks straight at Juyeon, making him uncomfortable and even more perplexed about what is occurring. Nobody else watches NoTube. Some people learn yoga and other activities from watching training videos at home. Some obtain instructional films for their college and school courses using NoTube. Watching their favorite streamers live on NoTube appeals to certain individuals. Juyeon, however, is unique. These days he can instantly view everyone's NoTube videos apparently hovering about them. Juyeon, though, is not really interested in understanding these specifics about other people. The class president, who just cares about academics, seems to like viewing dancing videos. Turns out that a friend Juyeon is a kendo fanatic and a heavy-set student who never works out, finds great enjoyment in workout videos. Juyeon can see everyone's favorite NoTube videos except one person just like this. The new transfer student, Min Seoha, gets her NoTube films totally protected and access to them banned. Min Seoha is directed by the teacher to greet the class. Instead of introducing herself, Min Seoha states in a casual manner she feels uneasy. Hearing this stunned the whole class. Even the teacher is startled and probes Min Seoha about what she means. Min Seoha smiles and explains she didn't intend it in a negative sense. The lads get upset when she then gestures to her school outfit, saying it's stiff and unpleasant to move in. From Min Seoha, only Juyeon receives a weird, foreboding impression. He wonders why just Min Seoha's NoTube videos exhibit error windows while everyone else's are perfect. Juyeon looks back at Min Seoha as she keeps watching, her eyes temporarily blank with a spooky expression. The disconcerting appearance shocks Juyeon. Assuming Min Seoha is staring at him, the man seated in front of Juyeon smiles hopefully, believing she would like him. The class concludes an hour later. Juyeon stays at his desk, his head resting on it as the other students move off for their break. He looks over at Min Seoha, surrounded by other inquisitive girls, all keenly asking her questions. Touching Min Seoha's hair, one girl remarks on how beautiful it is. Saying she feels uncomfortable, Min Seoha instantly slaps the girl's hand away. Mentioning her sensitivity, she tells the females to keep away from her. She spots Juyeon right then and points at him, wondering who he is. Yoon Ji-soo tells Min Seoha she is attractive and advises Juyeon to attempt to get her for the broadcasting club. Rising at this advice, Juyeon notes, Min Seoha appears a little odd. Yoon Ji-soo, however, argues Min Seoha is simply beautiful. She is not unusual. When asked about Juyeon, the females advise Min Seoha to ignore him and to give up on him. Juyeon is a real loner, often carrying a big bag about like a freak, they tell her. Min Seoha exhibits quick enthusiasm when learning about the bag. Yoon Ji-soo, meantime, pulls out her phone and shows Juyeon a video of him rescuing a woman and her child from a fire. The student in the video looks just like Juyeon, Yoon Ji-soo notes. Shockingly staring at the footage, Juyeon questions whether Mr. Kim filmed it. He dismisses the idea fast, persuading Yoon Ji-soo the student shown on the video isn't him. Juyeon starts sweating nervously when Min Seoha unexpectedly shows up behind him and asks whether he is the one shown on the video. Startled by her unexpected presence, Juyeon whirls around, terrified. Min Seoha queries his seeming surprise. She removes a strand of hair she points to on his shoulder while intently observing him. She then approaches him closely and asks whether he believed he could hide everything indefinitely. Min Seoha tells Juyeon to gently follow her with a spooky smile. Now, afraid beyond belief, Juyeon's face is twisted in terror, and he is sweating profundely. Min Seoha exits the classroom carrying Ju-yeon's backpack and gets a strong headache right away as a torrent of internet data fills his head. Startled, Ju-yeon discovers his backpack is absent. Min Seoha took it. Yoon Ji-soo asks whether Ju-yeon is okay after he starts twitching. With his head still ringing and his vision foggy without the bag, Ju-yeon tells her he will be back and swiftly exits the classroom. Struggling to make his way down the corridor, everything around him seems warped and floating like though he is in a dream. He finds Min Seoha already inside the computer room, his suitcase on the windowsills, when he gets there. Panting severely, Ju-yeon asks why she grabbed his luggage. Before pushing it out the window, Min Seoha gently puts a hand on the bag and tells him he will have to carry something far heavier from now on. Unable to act but only yell as his luggage falls to the ground, Ju-yeon stares in fear. Ju-yeon's veins start to pulse violently as suddenly every bit of internet knowledge floods into his body. Ju-yeon's bag falls close by two guys playing basketball on the playground. Attaching their focus, the gadget within the bag is destroyed right away. Startled, the two men gaze up at the building from where the bag dropped. Min Seoha notes, back in the computer lab, that Ju-yeon has a seed of Yggdrasil in his skull. She says the seed discloses all realities the owner is looking for as its intended use reflects. Should the owner so choose information, it provides insight. If the owner wants a strong weapon, the seed transforms into one. Should the possessor seek power, the seed transforms into a crown and bestows unlimited creative ability. But after the seed satisfies the needs of its owner, it devours that host totally. In the past, a disaster followed and swept over the planet whenever the seed ate its host. Hearing this, Ju-yeon wonders if that is the same seed within his head. She can see everything, Min Seoha informs him, so he shouldn't pretend he doesn't know. Leaning closer to Ju-yeon and staring at her, Min Seoha says generally he would be considered as a target for elimination. She does, however, add, this time, the higher authorities have decided to give Ju-yeon another shot. Totally perplexed by all this, Ju-yeon probes what she means by chance. Min Seoha reaches for a CD and says, the chance is to see if Ju-yeon is worthy, then snaps the CD in half. Min Seoha charges Ju-yeon, as if to stab him, holding the other half like a weapon. She sprints past Ju-yeon, slashing him across the chest as she swings the sharp piece. She clicks her tongue in dismay when Ju-yeon misses a dodge. Ju-yeon, who is clueless about what is happening, queries Min Seoha what the devil she is doing. Min Seoha lunges at him once again though, cutting his arms 2 times and causing him to scream in agony. She slides backwards, keeping distance from Ju-yeon. She takes off her uniform since she finds it awkward for attacking, and shows training clothes under. When Min Seoha starts to grow serious, Ju-yeon raises a hand and asks to wait. He notes that, while he possesses unusual skills, none of them would be fit for combat. He says he has only been able to run an excavator with his skills. Not trusting Ju-yeon's assurances, Min Seoha charges at him once more, insisting on grabbing actual desire. Surprised, Ju-yeon manages to evade the sharp weapon's trajectory at him. Min Seoha swings once more nevertheless, cutting his shoulder. Ju-yeon questions if Min Seoha is indeed trying to kill him, as he tries to defend himself. Min Seoha warns him to do something, or risk dying, since she only knows how to murder and ready to attack once more. Ju-yeon wonders what he can do against her while wiping blood off his cheek. He sort of wants to bolt through the open door. Min Seoha tells him, as if reading his mind, he will be used as a lab rat for his lifetime should he flee and be captured. Angry, Ju-yeon yells he doesn't know what to do and says he only needs money from his excavator work. Not knowledge is power. He calls out that he only wants to live like everyone else. Min Seoha makes it quite evident that it is not feasible, sneering at his yearning for consistency. She notes that Ju-yeon's power will cause his greed to finally eclipse his feeling. Ju-yeon, annoyed, asks Min Seoha what she knew about him and advises her not to assume things so readily. He says he has been lugging a 32-kilogram suitcase to school every day since he has abilities. He says furthermore that he has been working the excavator only to barely earn a living and has not made any friends. His eyes expand in fury, blue as his emotions control him, and the access denied screen next to Min Seoha breaks. Min Seoha is shocked to see Ju-yeon bypassing her guard, with his eyes shining brighter as he puts off an evil, terrifying aura with his hand clenched. Ju-yeon's anger mounts. When Ju-yeon is at last displaying his actual abilities, Min Seoha wonders what he would do should she refuse to let go of him. Juyeon finds Min Seoha's tenacity ridiculous. Juyeon can see her preferred videos flickering about her now that her defenses are down. Every one of these films relates to combat warfare. Min Seoha charges him once more, but this time Juyeon is ready and swiftly refutes Min Seoha's attack. Juyeon quickly and forcefully grabs Min Seoha's arm, raising her off the ground and sending her easily slamming to the floor. Juyeon opens his eyes and discovers he is floating before a sequence of videos all linked to combat fighting. He feels a weird sensation following second. He understands that the movies he watched surrounding Min Seoha before are the same ones he now find. As if Juyeon is sucking them in like a vacuum cleaner, the videos suddenly start flooding his thoughts. Trying to control it, he grinds his teeth and suffers terrible headache. The next instant, he returns to reality and is fighting Min Seoha. Grinning at Juyeon, Min Seoha remarks, "It's good to see him presenting his actual self." She extends her hand, grabs Juyeon by his hair, then clutches his neck with both of her arms. Juyeon responds fast too, pulling back and launching her flying to the other side of the room. Min Seoha, kneeling, notes Juyeon is strong and says she was meant to shatter his neck. Juyeon feels his neck with his palm and realizes Min Seoha is really dead serious about it. Min Seoha swings the knife toward him, and Juyeon chooses to concentrate on her motions. He leaps aside fast, just dodging the knife flown at him. Juyeon, considering carefully, uses his left hand to halt Min Seoha from attacking him once more. Min Seoha is rather surprised seeing Juyeon fight so brilliantly. Juyeon understands he cannot continue to block more and more assaults in depth. He chooses to retaliate, clenching his other hand while blocking with the first. Juyeon pushes her body down while grabbing Min Seoha by the shoulder and thrusts his leg upward to produce an uppercut to her gut. Juyeon surprises himself for being able to use Krav Maga following this effective attack. Exhausted, panting, Juyeon asks Min Seoha if she has had enough and advises they quit right now. Her head lowered, Min Seoha compliments Juyeon, noting he is performing better than she expected. Then, she charges Juyeon once again, grinning evilly and declaring she isn't. She throws Juyeon off balance with a slide tackle, therefore starting him to fall back. Juyeon falls loudly bang-wise on the floor. Min Seoha follows right away and lifts a leg to smash Juyeon. Juyeon moves his head sideways to see the attack, so Min Seoha's foot crushes the floor instead. Min Seoha, stooping down, reaches for a cable. Claiming he had run out of ability, Juyeon asks Min Seoha to. Min Seoha brands the cord with both hands and lunges toward Juyeon, saying that if he is giving up so readily, it is better to die. Juyeon finds himself in a trance as he feels the cable encircling it. Recalling the game of chase tag he used to play as a child, he speaks with his consciousness, attempting to find out what he can do since he's. In truth, Juyeon avoids getting strangled by making a last-minute split decision that drives himself ahead like. Min Seoha remarks that if Juyeon gets caught once again he will die. Yet he does not chase him right away, seeing him run like. Juyeon runs across the corridor like a flash, blowing food, snacks, and student. A little further down the hall, a man carrying a desk from a classroom spots Juyeon. Juyeon, however, just slips on the ground, avoiding running into the desk. Juyeon's only thought right now is that he needed to go as fast as he could away from Min Seoha. He expects he lost her when Min Seoha charges him from the front. Juyeon curses her and leans his head sideways to evade being. Min Seoha cautions Juyeon approaching the stairs that he will live like a lab rat permanently if he keeps. Juyeon understands he cannot shake Min Seoha only by sprinting given her speed. He thus investigates the system to find any helpful videos but discovers nothing. Juyeon worries he may get apprehended running at this. A while later, he finds two doors and pushes them open. He shuts and locks the doors from the inside once he is within. Sweaty, he turns around to discover three males in the corner all Juyeon is glad to be in front of these bullies for the first time in his life as he tearfully apologizes to them. Observing Juyeon, the man with dark hair wonders why he is. Juyeon lowers to his knees to atone to the bully. Observing Juyeon staring at them, the blonde bully advises him not to do so should he not want to die. Startled Juyeon, Min Seoha suddenly kicks the door open with a strong leg. Min Seoha enters inside and ruffles her hair. The blonde bully is charmed by her and comes. Min Seoha gives a fast kick to his chin before he can react, sending him unconscious crash to the. The unexpected attack shocks Juyeon. The two surviving bullies, as well furious, The bully leader attacks Min Seoha alongside another bully, resolved to exact revenge for the death of a They are not suited for Min Seoha though, who can quickly punches both of them and sends them flying sideways. Min Seoha warns Juyeon, turning to face him, that she advised him not to flee. She wonders whether he really believed these thugs would protect him. Juyeon lies, saying he wanted some time and he never anticipated them to. Then he claims he has realized something, and Min Seoha wonders what it is. His eyes shining, Juyeon says he remembered how much he wants to live when her started Juyeon starts downloading additional combat-related videos into his memory after fervent search. But he develops veins on his cheeks from the deluge of the great suffering overwhelms him. Juyeon falls to his knees and furiously scratches his head in irritation. Min Seoha assures him he will soon be free from his suffering based on her state. Declaring it his last, she charges at Juyeon, prepared to wrap him off. She pauses though, and rapidly raises her arms to stop Juyeon's kick directed at her face. The kick's force pulls Min Seoha somewhat backwards. Juyeon strikes again without thinking twice. But Min Seoha avoids it with great ease. He keeps launching unrelenting fists, but Min Seoha avoids every one. He launches a last punch, but Min Seoha swiftly moves to parry it with a palm slap. Using the opening, Min Seoha clutches Juyeon at the neck. She chokes him to the floor with a great thud after lifting him off his feet. Min Seoha asks Juyeon, down below, whether that's all he has. Rising her foot above his face, she says he is too weak to be a useful vessel. Juyeon asks her what she wants from him, as she starts choking him with her leg struggles for breath. Min Seoha orders Juyeon to spit out the intracell seed within of him. Desperate and almost dead, Juyeon's strong feelings start to control his body. As a power outage strikes, the pupils down on the lower floors see an abrupt blackness in the classroom. Yoon Jisoo scowls at her smartphone, which has lately ceased working. Juyeon is still choking from Min Seoha's foot pushing against his neck back on the rooftop. Juyeon is not the same this time though. The seed of intracellular has taken over him. Lifting his leg, Min Seoha gets flying off her feet from the seed of intracell kicking in the gut. Min Seoha is sliding a few feet backwards with the power of the kick. She notes Juyeon's strange smile and understands he might have cracked the vessel. Pointing his finger toward Min Seoha, the seed of intracell bursts a transformer in the power line behind her. As the explosion picks up force, smoke and fire explode skyward. Referring to Juyeon, the seed of intracell remarks that he is curious who is trying to murder his meat shield with the same eerie smile on his face. Min Seoha dares the seed of intracell to come at her, clenching her hands ready for war. The seed of intracell vanishes from view instantaneously and then returns directly before Min Seoha. One hand raised, he draws back a finger like a catapult and points it at Min Seoha's face. When the finger is released, the seed of intracell creates such force that Min Seoha flies backward. Few feet away, Min Seoha falls to the ground, but she gets back up. Seeing her still standing, the seed of intracell notices she is unlike any typical girl to resist his attack. Thrilled to be engaged further, the seed of intracell instructs Min Seoha to block properly and proclaims he will now utilize kicks. He charges Min Seoha, who lifts her arms for protection. The shockwave from the strong kick sends the goalpost from the rooftop smashing to the ground below. Perched at the brink of the roof, the seed of intracell peers down at the devastation he has wrought. Watching Min Seoha dangling from the side, clutching with barely 4 fingers, a spooky smile creeps across his face. Rising ready to kick Min Seoha off the building and finish her off, the seed of intracell elevates his. But just before he can strike, the seed of intracell abruptly stops his leg mid-air as the actual Juyeon comes. Fighting to take control of his body back, the seed of intracell asks what Juyeon wants. Juyeon reminds him that he had vowed to perform anything asked. Desperate, Juyeon punches himself in the face with great force and yells at the seed of intracell to escape right now from his. Moments ago, Juyeon's body became open to being possessed by the seed of intracell as he was overcome with strong emotions. Juyeon's actual consciousness discovers himself drifting in a blank, black empty. He knows this location is the same one he visited last time, almost flattened beneath the construction. Juyeon searches about wondering where the seed of intracell is. Startled, he suddenly discovers something on a screen. Juyeon's own body shows on the screen, but possessed by the seed of intracell, who waves at him with a sinister smile. Ju-yeon curses fiercely and demands his body back since he realizes he is under control. The seed of Intracell assures Ju-yeon to pay close attention and discover his actual physical strength. Not sure. Ju-yeon yells at the seed of Intracell to let him go right away. The seed of Intracell just mocks him, pushing Ju-yeon to attempt on her own escape. Grinning as though it's all a joke, the seed of Intracell teases Ju-yeon and Ju-yeon shuts down, realizing he can just watch. Frustrated, Ju-yeon remembers how he used to carry the hefty backpack every day while seated by himself in the classroom devoid of friends. But Ju-yeon is enraged since it is crossing the line when someone else takes over his. Clenching his fists, he tries to strike the screen before him with all his force. He keeps acting, striking the screen many times. His punches, however, are used. He falls, covered in sweat. They do not break the screen. Another screen opens before him just then, shocking. After the first, other screens show internet videos, and Ju-yeon understands he can apply his talents here after all. He starts to see some optimism from this insight. Driven to flee this dream, Ju-yeon chooses to do all necessary to release her. Ju-yeon is reminded of how he had placed all his might into his blows against Min Seo-ha, as a bigger screen shows video of punches. The punches back then were ineffective, but today, he believes he could be able to get them working. Clenching his fists, veins swelling in his arms, Ju-yeon generates a strong, deathly. He faces the television and says he will try everything he can. Charging a punch, he demands his body back by throwing all his strength forward. His punch smashes the screen with such force that a hole opens there. The whole screen fragments into innumerable bits. Min Seo-ha, hanging off the edge of the rooftop, pulls herself up and returns to firm ground. She sees Ju-yeon standing close by, his back. Leeching down, she grabs a wire cord and muses over killing Ju-yeon. Ju-yeon yells suddenly, demanding the seed of Yggdrasil come out of his skull. Min Seo-ha is startled since she understands once a host loses control, the seed of Yggdrasil never lets them recover their. Still, Ju-yeon seems to have recovered his sanity based on his behavior. Ju-yeon curses the seed of Yggdrasil, commanding it to return where it came from, grabbing his arm with her other. The seed of Yggdrasil takes over Ju-yeon's body once more in the next instant, and, sporting the same eerie smile, invites her to embrace. But Ju-yeon rapidly drives the seed of Yggdrasil out once more, and takes control of his body, hitting his face. Min Seo-ha moves in and wraps the wire rope around Ju-yeon's neck from behind while he is preoccupied. Ju-yeon has failed, she says. Now, he will die. But Ju-yeon assures Min Seo-ha he has recovered control of his senses and advises her to. Min Seo-ha, reevaluating her choice, grudgingly releases the wire while berating beneath her breath. Ordering the Alpha team to go, she removes her earpiece and speaks in. Under her direction, disguised gun-armed troops show up and point them at Ju-yeon. Ju-yeon finds it perplexing and not sure what is happening. When a soldier asks whether they should kill Ju-yeon, Ju-yeon yells he won't let anyone kill him. Min Seo-ha sighs, then says they will bring Ju-yeon alive to the Scallop's headquarters. The system echoes warnings over and over, a man in a lab coat nervously trying to evaluate the circumstances. The man is tense and uncertain about the unidentified mistake that has happened. The man whirls around an alert, blaring loudly behind. As computers short-circuit, catching fire and spewing smoke over the building, the system declares an emergency. 2 workers in safety gear calm the fire after a tense time. The action ends, very obviously. The aim is right within Ju-yeon's skull. One of the men wonders whether they are handling a monster. Still hooked to a chair, Ju-yeon says he is a high school student, not a monster. The 2 men say nothing, not sure how to respond to Ju-yeon's remarks. In the main control room, a researcher approaches the director carrying a stack of crucial paper. Reviewing the study, the researcher tells the director they have found dislikes in Ju-yeon's brain. At this point, in another room, a man is watching Ju-yeon on a screen and turns to Min Seo-ha to inform her he caught a large fish. The man is Min Dae-hoon, Scallop's headquarters director. Rising from his seat, Min Dae-hoon questions Min Seo-ha about her lack of early reporting of Ju. Min Seo-ha says, after some contemplation, that she considered Ju-yeon as her own little secret, like a cafe she intended to keep to herself. Not sure whether Min Seo-ha is serious or playful, Min Dae-hoon chooses to call off the conversation and urge her to bring anything forward. Min Seo-ha takes off her lenses and hands Min Dae-hoon. Min Dae-hoon slides the lenses on his head after attaching them to a VR system. but as he sees what the lenses expose, his countenance turns terrified and he fast takes off the VR helmet. It does, he notes, have the vibe of a coffee house you may wish to keep to yourself. Sighing, Min Seoha says the owner simply wasn't it, even if the coffee was good. Min De-hoon probes her about the type of owner she intended. Min Seoha acknowledges she's not sure exactly, and notes the other owner who visits occasionally is someone she never wants to see once more. Min De-hoon probes whether she is giving up, and Min Seoha says she struggles to put up with uncomfortable situations. Min De-hoon raises a finger to ask what they would do regarding the seed. Min Seoha says the seed grows by consuming desire. Since Ju-yeon lacks such needs, she believes it may vanish with time if left alone. Should it prove to be hazardous, she also advises they could just transplant it. Explaining that education is the main distinction between a hero and a villain, Min De-hoon asks Min Seoha whether she understands this difference. He further notes that although no tube can be aggressive and proactive, it has unlimited potential if correctly cared for. This surprises Min Seoha to come from Min De-hoon. Two researchers are guiding Ju-yeon meanwhile. Ju-yeon queries where he is being brought and whether it is to have his brain removed or anything else. Reminded of the number of devices he broke today, the researcher with parted hair snaps at Ju-yeon to be quiet. They eventually show up outside a secured area, and the researcher presents the guard a card declaring they are there under direction from the director. The researcher alerts Ju-yeon to enter when the door slides open. Ju-yeon meets Min Seoha and Min De-hoon as soon he walks in. Seeing Min Seoha causes Ju-yeon's face to twitch as he recalls all that has been occurring to him. Noticing Ju-yeon glaring at Min Seoha, Min De-hoon advises him not to fix his eyes on her. Min De-hoon laughs and says he'll free Ju-yeon right now when extending his arm to shake and introduces himself seeing that Ju-yeon's hands are shackled. Min De-hoon apologizes as he takes off the bindings, saying they were just following protocol. Min De-hoon invites Ju-yeon to seat after his hands are released. Min De-hoon sits beside Ju-yeon, clears his throat, and says they should start the interview. Ju-yeon doesn't answer the first inquiry on the specifics of his father. Min De-hoon says it doesn't matter seeing Ju-yeon mute. He claims he has the gun of truth. Min De-hoon raises his fingers at Ju-yeon and gestures a gun, saying it could sting a bit. Then he launches Ju-yeon backward with an energy force field striking her in the face. Min De-hoon says that what he fired was the bullet of truth following Ju-yeon. Once more pointing his fingers at Ju-yeon, electricity crackling around them, he promises him it won't harm. Min De-hoon launches an electric charge, targeted straight at him, claiming he will only open Ju-yeon's memories. Min De-hoon is pushed backward, nevertheless, by the attack's shockwave unexpectedly reversing direction. Min De-hoon looks perplexed, not aware of what just transpired, clutching his quivering hand with the other. Ju-yeon, meantime, is standing on his feet and totally lost. Turning around, he discovers his actual body slung against the wall, apparently asleep. Suddenly, Ju-yeon understands his consciousness has been detached from his body and he is under unseen force pressure. He discovers he is falling through an open sky as his feet sink into an unusual liquid. He keeps down, the great expanse of the pure blue ocean yawning out below him. Ju-yeon loudly splashes into the frigid seawater, gently sinking toward the seafloor. Desperate, he lifts his hand and fights to break free from the poorly illuminated surface above. Moments later, he at last pushes his head out of the waves, coughing fiercely and spewing copious amounts of seawater. He latches onto a tube he spots floating nearby. Panting fiercely and gasping for breath, he turns his head to see a big play button-like item blazing and rising into the heavens, when something to his left grabs it. Ju-yeon's awareness is experiencing all of this, while his actual body remains slumped in the lab, unconscious. The shot Min De-hoon fired at Ju-yeon badly burned his fingertips. Seeing how exhausted he appears after utilizing such a horrible technique, Min Seoha helps him. Min De-hoon notes that his method drew 10% of South Korea's whole energy. Blackouts brought on by this power surge have left several cities completely dark. People turn to their phones for light, since authorities have advised everyone to head straight back home. Still, several folks were clearly annoyed by the unexpected power loss. Min Seoha asks Min De-hoon back in the lab whether applying the method was really worth it. Min De-hoon responds that Ju-yeon herself now determines everything. Ju-yeon, meantime, fixated on the brilliant play button, notes how much it resembles the no-tube. His mind races with memories of his recent hardships, and he becomes enraged since he holds the seed of Yggdrasil responsible. The tube disappears, and Juyeon discovers he feels oddly at peace, lying on his back in the sea. A great wave starts to develop close by, but Juyeon stays blind, just savoring the peace. Rising to tens of feet above Juyeon, the wave gets higher and higher. The wave slams down, dragging Juyeon far under the surface of the sea, like a waterfall. The image veers suddenly, and Juyeon finds himself standing as a child in front of his childhood class. Juyeon is directed by the teacher to tell his peers what he did on vacation. Grinning, Juyeon informs the class he rode a banana boat and picked up surfing skills. One of his buddies wonders why Juyeon's skin hasn't browned at all since he actually went surfing. Juyeon is clearly nervous as this comment takes off his smile. Given his light complexion, the other kids begin to question if Juyeon actually visited the sea. Hearing their incredulity, Juyeon drops his head silently, not able to reply. Juyeon sits in a car returning home after school, while the family driver asks whether his day was well. Juyeon murmurs that it wasn't pleasant, lost in a vlog on his phone. Juyeon, setting his phone aside, wonders why skin tans occurs when people visit the sea. When the driver asks whether anything happened, the driver then inquires of Juyeon whether he has ever seen the sea. Juyeon notes that his parents are always too busy and admits he has. The driver groans, complaining about Juyeon's father's irresponsibility in not scheduling time for him. Then he says that, just as a snake sheds its outer layer of skin, people's skin tans when they visit. Curious, Juyeon asks if tanning is a good thing. The driver, sporting a sinister smirk, says, yes. Shocking Juyeon beyond belief, the driver suddenly turns to face Juyeon and reveals himself to be the seed of Yggdrasil. With thick clouds obscuring the sky and the faint outline of the no-tube button seen, suddenly rain falls and floods the area. Juyeon stays buried while the tube floats peacefully. The serene sea had begun to move moments before, and in minutes, a storm swept over the placid waves, becoming them somewhat turbulent. But the storm disappears just as fast as it shows up, leaving the sea calm. Min Dae-hoon turns on a record player while the room fills with the soothing lullaby. Min Seo, perplexed by this, probes Min Dae-hoon about why he is performing music in such a grave context. Min Dae-hoon says a melodic lullaby is the most comforting thing available during turbulent times. Watching Juyeon's leg twitch slightly, he says, every lullaby bears the same wish. Sleep well. Grimly adding, the world is. Min Seo notes that everyone driven by the seed of Yggdrasil has created anarchy. He wonders whether Juyeon may follow. A researcher bursts into the room at that point carrying a report and screaming for Min Dae-hoon. As Min Dae-hoon works through the report, he finds from the MRI scan that Juyeon's brain has a chip implanted. In Juyeon's memory, the automobile he is riding in keeps him en route. Yggdrasil gently tells Juyeon that visiting the seaside causes sunburn. He compares this to a snake shedding its skin. Juyeon asks timidly whether that is a good thing. The seed of Yggdrasil turns to face him with a sinister smile to confirm that it is. Startled by the unpleasant look, Juyeon slowly pulls back. Yggdrasil exits its seat and approaches Juyeon, reaching a hand toward his face. Grasping Juyeon's mouth, the seed of Yggdrasil probes whether he remembers that this was the start of everything. It says, Juyeon will never forget his 5th grade first day. According to Yggdrasil, the seed of Yggdrasil is the exact day Juyeon and his mother were engaged in a catastrophic tragedy. Before Juyeon's eyes, a bus emerged out of nowhere and crashed head-on against their car. Juyeon is suddenly pulled back to the water by this memory, plunging ever more into the ocean. Juyeon was dispatched by Min Dae-hoon to find the truth, but thus far he has only encountered most embarrassing and terrible memories. Until Juyeon abruptly emerges out of the sea, panting for oxygen, the tube keeps floating on the calm surface. He grabs the tube for support and tries to cough and spit his lungs empty of water. Frustrated, Juyeon demands to know where he is and what this unusual environment is from shaking his head. Abruptly, the seed of Yggdrasil shows up from the sea before him, insulting Juyeon by questioning whether all he yearns for is attention. The seed of Yggdrasil laughs at Juyeon, who yells at it to silence, floating freely into the air. Yggdrasil smirks and keeps mocking him, repeating its charge that Juyeon is merely an attention seeker. Furious, Juyeon curses the Yggdrasil seed and asks whether it crept into his head during the disaster. Hovering far above, the seed of Yggdrasil lazily responds that when it penetrated Juyeon's consciousness isn't important. Raising a finger, it emphasizes that the more important issue is the seed of Yggdrasil pinches its nose and plunges back into the sea with a scornful gesture, leaving Juyeon screaming after it, begging explanation. Frustrated, Juyeon slams his palm into the lake and yells, still not sure what truth he should be searching for. Juyeon wonders if the truth is somehow related to the no-tube symbol gleaming brilliantly like the sun. Thoughts of the sun, sunburn, and his past shed away like old skin in his head, spinning wild. He finds it difficult to remember what happened after the accident, and notes he missed a complete year of waiting. Just thereafter, Juyeon is submerged once more, as yet another huge wave slams down. Juyeon actually went into a coma and stayed in a brain-dead state for 90 days following the accident, before being sent to a research institute. While the seed of Yggdrasil falsely stated his parents had previously approved, the chief doctor asked Juyeon's guardian's permission. That confirmed, the doctor began the Juyeon experiment. Juyeon remembers opening his eyes following the accident, his head aching, his body overcome with nausea and vertigo, but he feels oddly. He woke up, and a bunch of two exuberant doctors approached him waving happy welcome. That signaled the start of all that came later. The physicians asked Juyeon many questions, asking whether he felt any discomfort, and pushing him to let them know about any worry. Juyeon still said nothing though, which led one of the doctors to advise they begin their process from now. To guarantee Juyeon's motions seemed natural, they started training him suitable walking technique. Emphasizing the need of removing any slurred or incorrect pronunciation, they taught him to speak fluently. Juyeon was even instructed in natural smiling, as if his feelings were rebuilt from. Like a newborn learning the fundamental elements of human conduct, he seemed to be under reprogramming. Juyeon looked at a nearby television screen one day over lunch and noticed a skeleton. The film explained how implanting computer chips in brain-dead individuals could rescue. Juyeon realized he had been exactly treated in this manner. His brain now bore a chip. Reversing back in time, the finding of the chip in Juyeon's brain shocked scientists Min Seoha and Min Daehoon. Min Seoha shows incredulity and questions how it might be a chip rather than a seed of intracell. The perplexing researcher acknowledges he has never seen anything like it before. Deep in contemplation, Min Daehoon wonders whether individuals who implant the chip copy the essence of intracell or if they are misguided. Suddenly realizing it, he says they had to wake Juyeon right away. He asks, in a rushed manner, whether the required power supply is ready. The researcher answers that it is completely charged. Juyeon is exercising on a treadmill throughout his recuperation and memory. The top doctor advises Juyeon to perform the last test after turning off the treadmill. Juyeon, sweating profusely, wonders whether passing the test entitrates him to depart. The doctor promises him he can, should he pass the test. Juyeon begs fervently whether he will be able to see his parents once more, and the doctor assures him he will. As Juyeon hears the doctor's comments, he opens a broad smile of delight. Patting Juyeon's shoulder, the doctor exhorts him to give his all in the last test. Juyeon is escorted by the doctor to an apparently highly advanced and alien chamber, full with a complex network of. Juyeon sits down as researchers put a helmet braggling with wires on his head. Juyeon pauses, perplexed by the arrangement, then probes what has happened. Before him looms a large glass tube, containing what the doctor describes as a sleeping god. The doctor says they are about to awaken this deity, and, in doing so, climb toward godhood personally. He motions confidently to let the researchers start their scheme. As Juyeon answers, he will go to the sea with his parents when the doctor asks what he intends to do once he wakes. Juyeon is reassured by the doctor, smiling sinisterly, that his dream will come true indeed. He then pushes a red button, sending Juyeon's body an electric jolt. Juyeon's body convulses fiercely as the lightning runs through his veins, his screaming in misery. Though this memory is past, it starts to influence Juyeon's actual body in the present, leading to uncontrolled twitching. Pointing to Juyeon, Min Daehoon says, truth exists in 3 stages. One based on experience, another rebuilt by memory, and the last entwined with lie. Min Daehoon says, lowering his electric-charged finger to Yeon's forehead, that the road to truth calls for deeper search. Juyeon's eyelids open just as his finger brushes against his forehead. Juyeon's mind floods with a burst of vitality that breaks his recollection. Chaos breaks out in the mental sea as enormous fingers fall from the divided clouds above. From the heavens, Min Daehoon's finger falls squarely toward the wild sea. Another huge finger slams into the classroom where Juyeon once lied about visiting the sea, upsetting the space. Another finger breaks through the structure at the place Juyeon is undergoing his final test. Min Dae-hoon expects the seed of Yggdrasil to show itself by controlling these great fingers. Min Dae-hoon sharpens his search for the seed of Yggdrasil, while his fingers rip through the ceilings and walls. The seed of Yggdrasil has seized a doctor and is ruthlessly torturing him in meantime. One of the doctor's eyeballs is pierced by the seed of Yggdrasil, which causes a terrible scream of suffering. The seed of Yggdrasil smiles maliciously and notes how much he is loving this anarchy when the doctor collapses to his knee. Something suddenly smacks into the seed of Yggdrasil, forcing him to jump back, and he responds by stomping on Min Dae-hoon's finger. Min Dae-hoon winches in pain back at the lab, but tells Min Seoa he's okay and orders the group to keep going, calling the machine team to start the operation and suck 10% of South Korea's electricity. The researcher yells over the walkie-talkie. Following the commands, the machine team channels the energy, which Min Dae-hoon finds difficult to control as he guides it across his finger. The seed of Yggdrasil muses aloud, asking questions about when human needs peak and whether they are ever really satisfied. He questions whether wants always keep growing or if they finish with riches, love, or success. Striding boldly, the seed of Yggdrasil gets to the big glass tube that lately imprisoned. Placing his hands against the tube, he whispers silently on the actual nature of human want. Turning around with brilliant dark eyes, the seed of Yggdrasil announces his intention to become an everlasting god by means of Juyeon's body. Min Dae-hoon pushes his electrified finger on Juyeon's forehead while back in the lab channeling another 10% of South Korea's strength into the gun of truth. Maintaining his stance, Min Dae-hoon parodies the seed of Yggdrasil, calling him all talk and preyed upon for other people's needs. Holding his injured eye from the gun of truth, the seed of Yggdrasil laughs and writes Min Dae-hoon's comments down as rubbish. His amusement stops though when he sees Juyeon glaring angrily and demanding that the seed of Yggdrasil leave his thoughts. Juyeon seems enraged, not intending to put up any more with the seed of Yggdrasil. Min Dae-hoon's electric finger lowers once more, this time precisely toward the seed of Yggdrasil. The seed of Yggdrasil is violently drawn toward the finger, much as a magnet. At last, Juyeon's head yields the seed of Yggdrasil, which materializes in the actual world that Min Dae-hoon catches in his palm. Min Dae-hoon sharply orders the seed of Yggdrasil to pay special attention going forward. Seeing the remarkably small size of the seed of Yggdrasil, the researcher hypothesizes it might have been altered. Min Dae-hoon concurs, thinking someone had changed the original form of the seed of Yggdrasil. Juyeon wakes just then and questions whether he has killed somebody anxiously. Rising slowly, he asks the same question again with worried voice. Min Dae-hoon tells Juyeon, kneeling beside him, most of the memories he observed were created by the seed of Yggdrasil. Juyeon, annoyed, probes what is true and what is a falsehood. Min Dae-hoon says that only those who implanted the seed of Yggdrasil in him can respond to that inquiry. Alerting Min Dae-hoon to hurry and warning that the power source is almost run down, the researcher asks hurriedly. As Min Dae-hoon explores their choices, he notes that completely eradicating the seed of Yggdrasil is the easiest answer. He advises nevertheless that doing this might cause Juyeon to become brain dead once more. Min Dae-hoon instead says Juyeon should learn to control the seed of Yggdrasil and accept it. Presenting these options, Min Dae-hoon invites Juyeon to make decisions. Surprising everyone, Juyeon requests the seed of Yggdrasil and says he wants it returned. Juyeon says he owns the seed of Yggdrasil as it sprung from it. Min Dae-hoon grudgingly passes the seed of Yggdrasil on, cautions Juyeon to treat it. Juyeon, clutching the seed of Yggdrasil, looks at it angrily, condemning it for all the suffering it has brought. Turning now to Min Dae-hoon, Juyeon asks angrily how he may learn to manage the seed of Yggdrasil. Rel artifacts, closely linked to the birth of the earth, are the seed of Yggdrasil. Every seed of Yggdrasil has grown, has fundamentally changed the path of human history. Selected by the seed of Yggdrasil, those people become key bearers who decide the fate of the. One of these seed of Yggdrasils, however, was intercepted by another gang, who created a quite different strategy. Their original method results from their aim to copy the seed of Yggdrasil rather than depending on its natural direction. Following much investigation, they were able to control the seed of Yggdrasil, so faithfully copied. They selected their own key bearers by mixing modern scientific technologies with the transcendent power of the relic to produce Their first concern now that Juyeon is under Scallop's care is teaching and safeguarding him for the benefit of mankind's future. Others in the company find Min Dae-hoon's choice to keep Ju-yeon alive unacceptable, particularly given a sinister-looking. Ju-yeon sees someone in an odd costume bowing and sincerely praying to God early the next morning. Ju-yeon sits on the sofa and, gently perplexed, asks the stranger who they are. Claiming to be chief researcher Song Sayami, the person introduces herself and says she will be looking after Ju-yeon questions her when she refers to him as new tube man, what she means by that. Approaching closely, Song Sayami says his nickname is derived from downloading no-tube videos to vanquish enemy. She then questions Ju-yeon non-stop, clearly making him uncomfortable with her eager conversation. Footsteps reverberate in the room at just that moment as Min Dae-hoon walks in, remarking on Song Sayami's odd attire. Song Sayami starts to explain her clothes, only to have Min Dae-hoon write off her as insane. Song Sayas tries to defend herself against the insult, but Min Dae-hoon calls her a two-faced torturer and cuts. With pride, Song Sayami says she was the one who re-implanted the seed of Yggdrasil successfully in Ju-yeon's skull. Emphasizing her experience, she states she would rather be known as a noob art scientist. She also reminds them that Ju-yeon himself requested instruction in controlling the seed of Yggdrasil. Ju-yeon adds that he still has a lot of things to complete, hence, he doesn't want to die just yet. Song Sayami advises beginning with how to turn the seed of Yggdrasil on and off, then learning how to properly pulling a chip from his pocket, Min Dae-hoon hands it to Ju-yeon and says it has details on people who experimented with his mind. Ju-yeon looks at the chip and neo-connects, reading the label. The primary physician involved in Ju-yeon's operation is speaking in a full hall of reporters elsewhere at the same time. What should he do next? A female reporter grinning, the doctor reports he has been thinking about his next moves. He explains that all his ideas lead to a single aim, therefore transcending the restrictions of common people to create a person pointing to his legs. He says these improved humans will have better lung capacity and besides, their IQ will be higher than that of ordinary individuals. At last, he announces his intention to produce a superhuman, which sets the press on. Rising from their chairs, reporters relentlessly probe the doctor about the idea. The doctor refutes claims made by one male reporter, accusing him of announcing without any observable outcomes. Finally thanking the press, the doctor leaves the stage. An accomplice tells him they have found the vessel, Ju-yeon, as he is lowering the step. Hearing this, the doctor smiles sinisterly, clearly delighted. Song Sayami shows up outside Ju-yeon's home 1 month later, yelling at him and reminding him that classes begin to. Inside, the room is a disorderly mess, full of empty snack packages and rubbish. Startled by her call, Ju-yeon wakes from his trance and realizes he has been viewing no-tube non-stop for 432 hours. Turning back, he laments his binge visibly overwhelming him and feels carefully peeling small spherical fruits. A chef skewers them onto a pointed stick to create a kebab. For a glossy finish, he evenly coats the fruits by dipping them into a sweet solution. Song Sayas confirms when he hands the stick to a big man, asking whether the fruits are really. One fruit the man bites makes him happy and really appreciates its taste. Having ate the rest of the fruits, he says the experience was rather fulfilling. Then he wonders what these fruits would taste like to someone with two minds, which confounds Song Sayami. Min Dae-hoon, meantime, is in a conference room, facing 3 big displays and a video call with 3. Demanding to know if Min Dae-hoon believes he could hide Ju-yeon indefinitely, a bald man throws his fist on the desk. Min Dae-hoon grins and says he isn't actively trying to hide Ju-yeon. Another man charges Min Dae-hoon of dishonesty, pointing out that he used 10% of South Korea's power without first permission. He queries whether all that effort was expended just for a chat. Min Dae-hoon acknowledges it was, stressing the need of learning Ju-yeon's past. Intrigued, the third man probes what Min Dae-hoon found specific. Min Dae-hoon notes that the seed seems to be especially attached to Ju-yeon. The man interrupts, saying he hates evasive responses, then shows Ju-yeon's picture, asking whether he. Showing more images, he writes Ju-yeon off as nothing particularly unique. Min Dae-hoon exhorts the men to see the potential Ju-yeon carries. One of the men reminds Min Dae-hoon that their company does not fund keyholder candidates less than a specific. Furthermore, he notes, top Special Forces agents have already been sent to evaluate Ju-yeon's aptitude. The first man breaks off to say that lately missing person cases have been rising. The others reject his allegation, saying that vanishings are not rare and occur constantly. The first man stresses, though, that only brain-dead patients are missing, which begs question. Min Dae-hoon gets intrigued by this disclosure and starts to conjecture. he wonders aloud whether the vanishings could be related to a group he knows. Song Seonmi walks in at that point to tell Min Daehoon Juyeon has already departed for feeling independence. Juyeon walks down the streets, headphones on and a light bag on his shoulders. Juyeon has not been used to the scene for some time. Screens float about the people he walks by, but something seems wrong. Thus he fixes his eyes more closely around. Juyeon discovers the screens are blank and show no videos at all after looking around the audience. 3 muscular males then suddenly show up and encircle Juyeon from all directions. Surprised, Juyeon probes whether they require anything. The men remain silent, and Juyeon remembers Song Seonmi's warning on possible dangers directed at him. He recalls her counsel to welcome his abilities and develop, rather than to run from them. Song Seonmi had underlined the need of nourishing the seed, stuffing its stomach, and claiming control over it as its master. She had also advised Juyeon get ready with a strong justification for using his powers when the moment arrived. When she thinks back on her remarks, Juyeon questions if surrounded by these men is sufficient reason to act. Song Seonmi had detailed a situation whereby Juyeon may persuade the seed of his need to survive from an onslaught. Juyeon chooses to start symbiosis with the seed, remembering her training. Closing his eyes, he discovers he is in front of hundreds of floating screens, one of which asks whether he like. Juyeon is rigid and motionless as he looks at the 3 men gathered around him. These men belong to a highly qualified elite task force, assigned the most perilous assignments for the government. Among them is the Horn Unit, an anti-superhuman operations-oriented specialized force selected for their unparalleled fighting ability. To the Horn Unit, eliminating a high school kid would be an easy and straightforward task. The little work makes them ashamed, yet one nevertheless kicks the sharp fruit kebab stick at Juyeon. Min Seo approaches Juyeon with ease, grasping the sharp stick midair. She looks to Juyeon and orders him to find out how effectively his acquired training will stand up in actual warfare. Min Seo and Seonmi had earlier talked about Juyeon's development and noted how naturally he could follow NoTube's videos. Min Seo noted that knowing how and to what degree Juyeon could apply the videos was more difficult than merely following them. Agreeing with Min Seo's judgment, Seonmi thumbs up and said Juyeon had great ability in adjusting to the videos. The sheer idea of it had thrilled her greatly. Juyeon is bending down in the past, orienting himself with hands on the ground like a marathon start. The Horn Unit mocks Juyeon, questioning whether he is trying to flee. Juyeon drives ahead, his foot slamming hard into one of the men's faces like a bullet. The hit's force is so great that the man's teeth break and fly. The man is propelled flying backwards and slams into the ground some few feet away. Completely startled by Juyeon's quickness and force, the other 2 men stare on in wonder. Glancing at the men, Juyeon adds coolly not to accuse him since they attacked first. Hope to catch him off guard. The bald man dashes at Juyeon from behind. Juyeon, though, is too quick, whirling to strike a strong kick square into the bald man's face. The force of the kick leads the bald man to groan in agony and twist his head abnormally. His face crashes within his mouth, and in a flash of fury, he curses Juyeon. Rising his leg high, Juyeon strikes the posture of a master Jeet Kune Do. Angry, the bald man closes his fists and punches Juyeon. Juyeon does, however, evade some and blocks others. The bald man questions if all Juyeon knows is how to evade as he keeps attacking. Juyeon clenches his fist, then pushes it forward to strike the bald man's rear side with great force. The hit knocks the bald man's wind out of him. He stumbles, trying to collect his breath. Saliva flows from his mouth as he learns Juyeon is a boxing pro. With a perfect uppercut that sends the bald man soaring through the air, Juyeon ends the bout. The bald man is struck unconscious as he thuds loudly down to the ground. Juyeon turns to the fallen man and apologies, wiping the perspiration off his brow, saying he is rushing to get to school. Seeing all of this, the last surviving man, despite his own great power and training, finds his body freezes with terror. Desperate to flip the tide, the man grabs a sharp knife, resolved to show he won't lose to a high school student. He charges Juyeon, throwing the knife toward him, but Juyeon deftly avoids the attack. Juyeon feels a little sting, even with his speed, when the knife cuts his cheek. Juyeon backs off, dabbing the blood off his cheek, and realizes he no longer gives the repercussions any thought. His eyes shine brightly as he says anyone who attempts to meddle with him going forward won't go away unharmed. Resolved now, Juyan charges at the man with his hand raised for impact. Juyan gathers all his might and sharply smashes the man's face, deformed his features. This sequence of events exactly matches what Xiaomi had intended. A sequence of actions ending in the slap that guarantees the conflict is sealed. Juyan stares down at the three vanquished guys, now unmoving on the floor. Juyan strikes a joyful stance, as though he had just won a gold medal, sliding his foot across the floor. Seeing the fight, a big man eating a fruit kebab calls Juyan a faulty good. The man stands across the road, glaring at Juyan, his eyes narrowing as Juyan marks his triumph. Gritted teeth, the man mumbles, calling Juyan a faulty product, then fast writes a report including his name and location. Unknown of the man, Juyan and Min Seo criticize Juyan's cheap copy as they leave. Yoon Jisoo pauses back at school, her hands covering her lips as her eyes enlarge upon Juyan following such a lengthy absence. Approaching him closely, she wants to know why he has been absent for so long and what on earth he has been doing all this time instead. Her eyes then follow his protruding veins, and with a mix of interest and eagerness, she asks whether he has been working out non-stop. The other pupils in the class turn to stare at Juyan. Their confused features show their difficulty to identify him. Min Seo strongly advises Juyan not to start any pointless agitation and to make sure he reports everything in great detail. Juyan shakes his head, then snaps back, promising her he will follow instructions. Observing their encounter, Yoon Jisoo's countenance darkens, and she thinks about their relationship, a trace of jealousy showing up. Her ideas spiral even more as she begins to wonder whether Juyan and Min Seo might be covertly meeting outside of the university. Juyan enters an empty classroom in meantime and starts to tell Min Dae-hoon and Song Sayami about the incident he encountered fighting the unusual men. Curious about how Juyan feels about returning to school after spending so much time away, Sayami probes. Juyan pauses, then says, with fresh confidence, "It feels like a fresh start." Min Seo is standing at the door, her eyes darting the corridor in search of any students while Juyan addresses. While Min Dae-hoon insists Juyan should visit the teacher's office for unresolved problems, Sayami advises him not to act carelessly. Just as Juyan is walking to the teacher's office, moments later he hears something that makes him completely mute. Juyan is told by the teacher that he currently receives help from a famous scholarship foundation. Though his marks are ordinary, he says the foundation sees Juyan's talent and will help him in his future activities. To add to the surprise, the teacher says the representative of the charity specifically requested Juyan. Turning Juyan his life record, the teacher gently advises him he is free to make whatever corrections he thinks required. As Juyan gets the report, his hand grips the pen tightly, and he starts writing something on the paper. His countenance hardens. Juyan gets out of his seat once done, bows politely to the teacher, and then leaves the office. Examining the form closely, the teacher notes that Juyan removed dead from the parents section and replaced it with the word searching. Curious back at headquarters, Sayami asks Min Dae-hoon why he chose to send Juyan back to school. Min Dae-hoon pauses when he says Juyan's return to school and experiencing normalcy is only natural. He says that although someone may be distinctive or different, deep down they are still students with the same rights as everyone else. Since Juyan indicated a need for a regular existence, he stresses letting her enjoy the school experience. Smiling, Sayami notes that Min Dae-hoon has a talent for spotting oddball people and pushing them toward common goals. The doctor sits alone in his poorly lit office at the Neo Connecting organization, reading over computerized records. He holds a pencil and frantically notes, his concentration unbroken as he plans over the copious of material before him. His motions stop as his eyes go wide in horror at seeing a report calling Juyan a faulty good. Rising quickly, he takes his phone and calls the spy angrily, asking coldly whether Juyan has been found. The spy, who had earlier that morning reported on Juyan, confirms and adds that Juyan is in touch with Scallops right now. The spy grinds his teeth and promises to clear everything when the doctor asks whether he can manage the case on his alone. In a spiteful tone, the doctor calls Juyan an unappreciative monkey and walks into a large lab with rows of human pods, each linked to cables, producing a terrible, crazy scientific atmosphere. The pods contain unconscious people whose dead faces hang in a terrible stillness. Wires link the humans within the pods, while screens on front of every pod show sniper training movies. Attached to a chip and gently handled by two robotic arms, Idrisil sits on a neighboring table. One of the men's temples gets a precise hole created by another robotic arm with a drill. The operation is then completed when the robotic arms directly shove the seed of Idrisil straight into the man's brain. Abruptly, the man's eyes open, bloodshot and throbbing with bulging veins as alarms blast across the facility. The doctor smiles and murmurs, "There isn't much left to accomplish now," as he watches the disorganized scenario develop on a television. Not too long later, the system declares success, since every test participant completely connects with the seed of Idrisil. Juyan is working hard, doing push-ups, and his physique is shining with sweat as he reaches his 98th repeat. Min Seo shows up at that precisely and tells him they have an assignment from headquarters. Juyan keeps doing push-ups while Min Seo simply sits on his back, straining his arms. Min Seo says, scrolling through her phone, that Scallop's radar has found a widespread problem concerning missing brain-dead patients. Juyan does his 100th push-up with all his might, startling Min Seo to leap off him. Min Seo informs Juyan as he falls to the ground that their goal is to look into the vanished patients. Panting excessively, Juyan asks cautiously whether the task is probably dangerous. Min Seo comforts him that throwing a towel on his face won't be overly dangerous. Then she asks Juyan whether he knows the person in the picture while holding her phone up to his face. Glancing at the picture, Juyan notes the man as Neo-Connecting CEO and doctor. Min Dae-hun believes Min Seo's lost patients are connected to Neo-Connecting and must probe further. Yoon Ji-soo shows up on the rooftop out of the blue and asks suspiciously what the two of them are doing. Assumed they are working out together, she smiles at them. Ignoring Yoon Ji-soo completely, Min Seo looks to Juyan and orders they will begin their task as soon as school ends. Turning back, Min Seo cynically questions Yoon Ji-soo why she follows them about like a lost dog all the time. Min Seo glides past her and vanishes down the steps without waiting for a reply. Yoon Ji-soo asks Juyeon whether she would want help with something. Yoon Ji-soo shows she's trying to capture the trendy superconductor dance and asks whether Juyeon knows it with a cheeky smile. Juyeon agrees to assist. She grabs her phone and begins filming while Yoon Ji-soo fervently executes the dance moves. The captain grumbles at an excavation site because a new worker is struggling. If Juyeon were here, the work would have been completed already. Startled, the captain finds a hand grabbing his shoulder out of nowhere. Turning around, the captain finds a big man standing behind him with a threatening posture, encircling him with one arm. The man asks subtly whether he knows what happens when someone loses their sight. The man describes in a horrific manner how the body ages without allowing him an opportunity to respond. Distressed and perplexed, the captain asks to know the man's name. The man removes his glasses to show brilliantly abnormal eyes and orders the captain to call Juyeon coldly. Later that day, Yoon Ji-soo bursts in excitement, saying her most recent dance video is getting lots of views. She chats merrily as she strolls with Juyeon and Min Seo on the sidewalk. When Juyeon's phone rings, he discovers it's a call from the captain who he hasn't heard from in some time. Stopping suddenly, Juyeon seems concerned. The girls inquire what's wrong. Setting his suitcase aside, Jiyeon yells that the captain is under threat and runs. Screaming that they have no time to veer off course, Min Seo follows after him. Juyeon shows him fast on his phone a picture of the captain beaten and down on the ground. Min Seo curses beneath her breath and accelerates, realizing the seriousness of the matter. Yoon Ji-soo waves uncomfortably and feels left out as usual as she watches them vanish into the distance. Arriving at the place, Juyeon and Min Seo skin the area while catching their breath. Juyeon dashes for the captain right away after noticing he is unconscious some feet away. Juyeon jumps forward without thought while Min Seo tries to stop him. Suddenly, a big excavator races toward the captain, its claw set to smash. Juyeon moves fast, drawing all his might to pull the captain clear of danger. The spy emerges from the shadows as the dust settles, his great frame towering above. Juyeon asks who he is, but the stranger responds vaguely that he should already know. The spy, teasing Juyeon by stating he would know him if his eyes were gone, radiates a lethal aura. Juyeon feels a flood of familiarity when he understands the man comes from scientific tech. Turning his back on Juyeon, the man thanks him, saying he replaced his eyes. The man raises his fist and sends a strong shockwave, turning the excavator on its side. Seeing the demonstration of pure force, Juyan and Minseo realize he is no typical opponent. Shaking his hand free, the man says he will now see Juyan's eyes, and the seed of Yggdrasil buried in his. Juyan observes silently as the man, lost in a fatal aura, keeps his posture unshakable. Juyan closes his fist, seeing the man. Feeling completely sick of the circumstances, he gets enraged, thinking about being pursued like a lapdog, even though he did nothing to hurt. Gritting his teeth, he warns the man he won't be able to sit still anymore, which causes his smile to get much more broad. Keeping his cool, Juyan asks what he did first. The man coldly orders that faulty goods like Juyan be taken off, after removing his glasses to show dark, piercing eyes. Fed enough of the talking, Juyan runs forward and gives the man a strong kick right on his head. Juyan follows with a mid-air spin and hits another kick with his opposite leg, using the skills he acquired in. The man is propelled somewhat backwards after absorbing the whole force of the. Startled to see the man stay on his feet and stand straight, Juyan is totally unscathed from both. The guy scans Juyan, seeing his internal organs and the seed of Yggdrasil within him, as though through transparent glass, much as in an X-ray machine. Understanding the risk, Minseo yells a caution to Juyan regarding the man's. The man suddenly launches a fist forward, striking Juyan's face with great force. Following right after, he lifts Juyan off the ground by punching her in the stomach with his other hand. Grasping Juyan's hair like claws, the man launches a barrage of forceful fists, squarely. Now pummeled, Juyan has clearly wounded arms from attempting to stop the strike assault. Not yet happy, the man lifts his fist once again and strikes Juyan with such force that sends him flying back. Juyan leaves an impact crater as she bounces off the ground like a stone tossed thumping. Minseo looks nervously as Juyan approaches certain failure. The man walks closer. Juyan raises his hand, then lowers it to seize him once more. Juyan groans in agony as smoke and dust whirl around him, while seated stunned on the ground. Juyan leaps upward suddenly, aiming a kick at the man, who easily dodges it. Locking his hands around Juyan, the man squarely hammers him down with great force. Grinning as he towers over Juyan, the man curses him and announces he is about. Juyan lies on the ground, struggling to get up, blood flowing from his mouth. The man cries out in agony when he takes a fistful of sand and dumps it over Juyan's eye. Juyan starts screaming in agony and shouting fiercely, his eyes blazing. Rising over the writhing Juyan, the man mocks him and advises him to experience the feelings he used to stifle. The man reminds Juyan that he used to be very much cared for. Juyan first encountered the man in the lab seeking assistance with an injured. Tears in his eyes, Juyan had related how he injured himself sprinting. Like a loving brother, the man had taught Juyan safe running techniques to prevent. Juyan had praised him for his suggestion not to run aimlessly, but rather to concentrate on his. The man had seen with obvious concern as the Juyan and the throne of Yggdrasil started to synchronize. But the man hugged Juyan in relief after witnessing the operation go off, before Juyan passed out from tiredness. But Yggdrasil attacked the man and damaged his right eye. When the seed of Yggdrasil claimed Juyan's, the man so lost vision and left to deal with the effects of that strike. Now in the present, mechanical eyes have replaced his own ones, so he may see well beyond human reach. Juyan is kneeling, as the guy says the world is falling and has to be rebuilt once the dust settles. Minseo suddenly charges from behind, trying to hit the man. The man responds quickly though and precisely strikes Minseo back with his elbow. Minseo stumbles backward, her arms shaking from the hit, and opens wide in disbelief. Minseo winches and understands the man's strength is overwhelming since she feels her arms broken. The man informs Juyan he failed as an experiment as he lacked the powerful ego destroying others. He makes fun of Juyan, remembering how he tried to placate the researchers, even as they prodded about his brain. The man keeps insulting him and misses the shovel of the excavator falling quickly from above. The man glances up at the last second, just as the shovel falls on him, producing an explosive blast of trash. A minute earlier, a woman jumps atop the excavator and starts punching arbitrary buttons out of wild guess. Luckily, she starts the machine and starts working on figuring out how to run it. She picks up shovel movement and arm up and down of the excavator in a matter of seconds. Seonmi moves the excavator at the victim following rapid control mastery and strikes him from behind with the shovel. The man is flying backward from the strike, and with a loud swoosh, he lands several feet distant to the ground. The folks' clothes are left astonished when the excavator unexpectedly attacks the villain. Seonmi turns the excavator around and drives it straight into the surviving guys running for their life. The fleeing men stop as well, sounding loud sighs of relief, just as the excavator pauses suddenly. Juyeon probes closely, wondering who is running the gadget. Seonmi leaves boldly, asking to know who dares to disturb him. Seeing her, Juyeon flashes an enthusiastic smile on his face. Juyeon bows his head and really regrets behaving carelessly on his own as Seonmi gets ready. Seonmi shocks Juyeon by softly stroking his cheek, providing comfort rather than wrath, as she raises her hand as though to slap him. Now covered in a huge cloud of dust, rising menacingly toward the heavens, the area the man had crashed upon is Min Seo. Clutching her wounded arm, says the villain is like a cyborg with unusual eyes that let him see behind him. Seonmi brushes off this, implying the man sees forward instead of backwards, by employing surrounding CCTV cameras to improve his vision. She then notes the risk of staying and says she has already wrecked most of the nearby surveillance cameras. She tells them to withdraw to the base so they might reorganize and create fresh ideas. All around is shaken by a sudden, large explosion that sends another plume of smoke skyward. As the smoke starts to clear and the man's dark shape shows, Juyeon and the two females watch in shock. Rising completely into view, his brilliantly shining eyes cut through the dust, his somewhat battered cyborg form exuding wrath. Horrified by what she sees, Seonmi mumbles she has no particular interest in cyborgs. Understanding the approaching threat, Juyeon yells a frantic warning for Seonmi to flee just as the cyborg dashes forward at rapid speed, like swatting at a fly. Easily lifting Seonmi off the ground, the cyborg grabs her by the throat. Struggling in his hold, Seonmi tries furiously to take his palm away from her neck, but finds it impossible. Tightening his hold, the cyborg calls her an unexpected catch, his voice tinged with hate. Seonmi smiles and grabs a circular object, flinging it close to the cyborg's feet despite her terrible circumstances. The gadget shocks him and makes him groan in agony as it unleashes many electric threads that rush around the cyborg. His groans soon stop though when he says the electric charge hardly ties him. He hits her with his free hand before Seonmi can respond, only to have Min Seoha spring at him from behind and kick him in the face. The cyborg responds quickly, reaching out his arm to seize Min Seoha by the neck, so locking her in his hold. He laughs sickeningly and crushes the heads of both females in his hands. Both Seonmi and Min Seoha are stunned from the violent accident. Their mouths are bleeding and their eyes are closing, almost passed out. The cyborg cries with laughter. Seeing this cruelty, something deep within Juyeon bursts like a torrent of old hopelessness. His memory goes back to the day his mother was caught in the automobile accident and told him to flee. Just as the automobile burst before his eyes, killing his mother immediately, a stranger had dragged him to safety. Haunted by that day, Juyeon has struggled with guilt and cannot pardon himself. Friendless and alone, he has battled years to shed the shadow of his past. All Juyeon ever yearned was to lead a regular life like everyone else, even after acquiring powers. But his dread of failing has always kept him back and left him helpless in pivotal events. His mind plunging into darkness, this extreme remorse and powerlessness threatened to overpower him totally. Watching no-tube movies helps him to escape reality and makes him wish he had stayed in his room. A motivating video showing the message challenging the excuses individuals create while they waste their life away shows on a screen just then. Seon falls to the ground, passes out lying sideways. Min Seon, severely injured, battles to remain conscious and finds she cannot feel her face. Seeing her react, the cyborg smiles and gives a strong kick, his finishing action, which sends her flying. Few feet distant, Min Seon falls to the ground while Juyeon sprints toward the cyborg to face him. Turning to face Juyeon, the cyborg notes coldly that it's best to promptly and painlessly kill a raised dog. Juyeon is adamant but feels overwhelmed. He labels himself as useless and unfit for the strength of the cyborg. Tears rising, Juyeon's face twists as despair drives him to want to give up. Juyeon's thinking suddenly echoes the inspirational speaker's speech, challenging if his doubts are indeed his actual barrier. The scene moves in his mind's eye to a large mountain range blanketed in snow with howling cold winds. Juyan finds himself before the speaker, who looks at him and probes whether he is having trouble. Shivering from the cold, Juyan confesses that battling the cyborg seems like an impossibility. The speaker queries whether Juyan is caught in the past and unable of moving forward and acting. Juyan reluctantly accepts, only to be greeted with the speaker labeling him alive. Approaching closely, the speaker charges Juyan of dodging responsibility and creating excuses. Frustrated, Juyan yells at the speaker, wondering what he should do. Turning around, the speaker says even he is not sure. Juyan asks why he alone must bear such a great weight and go through so much suffering. The speaker coolly notes that Juyan was selected to be a hero saving NoTube, not as a coward. Uncertain, Juyan queries why he was selected and what distinguishes him from everyone else. Grinning, the speaker adds, it's because Juyan actually liked NoTube videos. Hearing this, Juyan is inundated with memories of himself surfing through many NoTube movies, whether at breakfast, while sleeping, or even while changing clothes. His daily existence consisted in NoTube always. He remembers a whole month viewing NoTube without stop. The speaker exhorts Juyan to trust himself, embrace the truth, and act as she names him a hero for the platform. Reverting to reality, Juyan discovers he is before the cyborg. Driven now, being branded a hero changes Juyan's perspective, and he now stands unbroken and the cyborg raises his fist to strike, but Juyan stiffens himself in readiness to offset. Juyan catches the cyborg off guard when he abruptly compliments him as he pushes his fist forward. The cyborg demands why he's being honored after Juyan deftly avoids a flurry of punches he launched. Juyan leaps high into the air, backflips to keep distance several feet away. Juyan, grinning boldly, claims the cyborg gave him the drive he required and motions mockingly for him to escape. Furious, the cyborg charges Juyan, determined to rip him apart, bit by bit. Focusing closely, Juyan says he knows how to stop the oncoming cyborg. Juyan raises two fingers, then thrusts them forward, his weak point exactly piercing the cyborg's eye. The cyborg falls to his knees, clutching his face as his vision is lost, and screams. Not wasting time, Juyan runs for a nearby excavator to create a strategy for ending the battle. The captain supports Juyan on realizing his goals, so motivating him to keep on. Juyan leaps powerfully inside the excavator, prepared to totally destroy the cyborg. Juyan forces the shovel of the excavator to break the cyborg's body into innumerable broken fragments. The cyborg's decapitated head rests among the debris as the smoke clears, his body wrecked. Not happy, Juyan leaves no trace by crushing the last bits of the cyborg into absolute. Watching their triumph, the captain and the others yell enthusiastically to celebrate their hard-earned success.